Hi there, it's Autumn from itsalwaysautumn.com, and today I'm going to show you how to make a beautiful, chunky, hand-knit blanket. These blankets are so cool because you can make them even if you've never knit anything before. No experience necessary. I'll walk you through every step of the process in this video so you can make your own chunky blanket. For this blanket, I'm using tube yarn, which is a cotton tube stuffed with polyester filling to make a nice fat yarn. You could also use a chunky chenille yarn or a wool yarn. I like to place the ball of yarn away from me on a table with the tail of the yarn pointing toward me. To begin, we need to start with a slip knot. So wrap the yarn around your hand to tie the slip knot. As you pull the loop through, you can pull the knot tight, and then we want to measure the loop to make sure it's the right size. We're going to be making a lot of loops in this blanket, and we want them all to be a little bit bigger than 2 inches, about 2¼ inches, which is just about the width of my 3 fingers. So you'll see throughout the video that I use these fingers to test the width of the loops. For the first row of our blanket, we're going to create a chain. This is just a series of loops. Every time you make a loop, starting with your slip knot, you reach through it and grab the working yarn, and then pull enough out to make another loop. Every time you'll use your 3 fingers to make sure that you're making loops the same size. Continue reaching through the loops to grab the working yarn, to pull and create another loop. You're going to keep doing this until the chain is the width that you would like your finished blanket to be. For this example, I'm only making my chain about 10 or 12 loops wide, but yours is probably going to be quite a bit wider, maybe 20 to 30 loops wide. Once your chain is the same width you'd like your finished blanket to be, you'll make one more loop. So ignore the loop you just made and look back at your chain, and you'll be able to see a hole in each loop that you made on your way going to the right. Now we're going to put a loop through each of those holes, working toward the left. Again, using our fingers to measure to make sure the loops are all the same size. Remember to create the loops by pulling the yarn from behind the chain through each hole. You're going to continue doing that all the way until you get back to the knot at the left side of your blanket where you started. This is called a knit stitch, and this is the basic stitch that we'll be repeating over and over to create our blanket. When you get back to the knot, send one last loop through the knot itself. Now we're ready to start on row 2, working toward the right. Anytime you start a new row in the opposite direction, you're going to skip the very first loop, which will be the last one you just made. Skip that one and start knit stitching through the second loop. Continue across your blanket toward the right, again pulling loops from behind and using your 3 fingers to measure that they're the same size every time. When you get back to the right side, you'll find the loop that you skipped on the last row. Make sure to grab that loop and work through it. Then, as you start going back toward the left, skip it again and start with the second loop instead. So remember, every time you're starting a new row, you'll skip that very first loop. But every time you finish a row, you need to reach down and make sure you work through the loop that you skipped last time. Another thing to remember is to keep your loops right next to each other as you're working your stitches. If your loops get pulled far away from each other, you're going to end up with stitches that are too loose and you'll have big holes in your blanket. Also remember, as you're pulling your yarn through to make a loop, be sure that you're pulling from the working yarn or the ball of yarn instead of pulling the other way so that the loop you just made gets even smaller. We want to make sure all of the loops stay the same size and are pretty evenly spaced for the best looking finished blanket. As you continue going back and forth making more rows, you're going to start seeing the pretty knit texture on your blanket. You'll also be able to see how you're getting a braided look along the sides of your blanket by skipping the loop every time you start and then grabbing that skipped loop every time you finish a row. Now it's time to add a new ball of yarn. If you're working with a chunky chenille yarn, you can just tie on a new ball of yarn, pull the knot tight, and clip the excess. But if you're working with tube yarn, we'll actually want to quickly sew the 2 tubes together. Grab the tail end of your new ball of yarn and pull the cotton casing down about an inch. That'll allow you to cut off this portion of the polyester filling. Roll the casing back up and now fold it inside so that you have a clean folded edge. Take the tail end of the other yarn and slide it inside the tube of the second yarn. Make sure they're overlapping, and then just grab a needle and thread and use small stitches to attach them together, hand sewing all the way around. You can be really careful and make sure it looks super tidy if you want, but you really don't need to stress about making it perfect. Once it's sewn together, you'll continue knitting up your blanket, and once the blanket is completed, no one is going to be able to find the seam where you've joined your balls of yarn together. I prefer to sit at a table to work on these blankets, even when they start to get bigger. I roll up the portion that I've already completed to keep it out of the way. Once it gets too big to comfortably work over it, I turn it around so that the portion that's done is away from me on the table, and I'm pulling loops toward me at the bottom of the table instead. I continue on this way until it's time to finish up the top. When your blanket is as long as you want it, it's time to bind off the end. Make sure you have finished a row and then cut the excess yarn so that you have a tail that's about 12 inches long. Now go to the other side of the blanket. On the opposite side from where the tail is, grab the very first loop and then send the second loop through it. Then send loop 3 through loop 2 and loop 4 through loop 3, and so on. This is going to create a braided effect that matches the braid up and down the sides of your blanket. When you get to the very last loop, which is the one that was skipped from the row before, just overlap it with the last loop on the top row. Grab the tail of your blanket and thread it through those overlapped loops, and then tie a nice tight knot. Finally, you'll take the tail and you'll weave it in, just going right along the edge of the blanket. You'll want to use a needle and thread to secure the end of the tail to your blanket. So do the same thing you did when you were adding on a new ball of yarn. Cut some of the filling out so that you can fold the casing in, and then just grab a needle and thread to sew it so that it's secure. I think you're going to love making your own chunky blanket. It's a fun project to work on and really adds a cool modern touch to your decor. Thanks for watching, and visit me again at itsalwaysautumn.com.